The council called for a recess that stretched into hours. Representatives from various species gathered in private chambers to debate the implications of the human proposal. Some saw it as a dangerous precedent that could destabilize centuries of careful diplomacy. Others saw something else entirely, a chance to challenge practices they had long found distasteful but never had the courage to oppose. Ambassador Claire Dawson found Nathan and Lyra waiting in a small side room. She looked tired but determined. "The debate is getting interesting," she said as she sat down across from them. "Several delegations have approached me privately to express support for your position." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "I thought everyone would side with Drax. The whole point of the council is respecting different customs." "True, but you touch something that has been building for a long time. The Kelthari are not the only species that practices slavery. Others do as well, and many more have quietly objected while doing nothing. Your stand gave them cover to speak up." Lyra listened silently. She had never imagined that her fate might influence galactic politics. She had only wanted to survive, to be free, to find some small corner of the universe where she could exist without chains. Now she was at the center of a storm that might change everything. A message arrived summoning them back to the hearing chamber. The council had reached a decision, though Claire warned them that the outcome was far from certain. The chamber felt different when they returned. The murmured conversations had a sharper edge, and many representatives were looking at Drax with expressions that suggested their views had shifted. The Kelthari overseer stood alone on his side of the floor. His confidence cracked but not broken. The head of the council, an ancient being from a species that had achieved spaceflight before humans discovered fire, spoke in a voice that resonated through the chamber. "The council has deliberated on this matter. We recognize that it touches fundamental questions about the nature of personhood and the limits of cultural sovereignty. We cannot and will not impose a single answer on all member species." Nathan felt his heart sink. This sounded like a defeat wrapped in diplomatic language. The ancient being continued. "However, we also recognize that the principles underlying this station require us to respect the laws of member species within their own territories. Humanity has the right to grant citizenship to those within its borders, regardless of how those individuals came to be there. Therefore, the council will not prevent the marriage of Nathan Cole and Lyra Vian. And we acknowledge that such a marriage grants her the full protection of human law." Drax stepped forward with fury burning in his silver eyes. "This is unacceptable. You are rewarding theft and murder. If humans can simply declare our property to be citizens, then our entire economic system is under threat." "Your economic system is built on chains," the head council member replied calmly. "Perhaps it is time to consider whether that foundation will hold in the long run." Drax stood rigid for a moment, his hands clenched at his sides. Then he turned to Nathan with cold precision. "If the council will not give me justice, then I will seek it in another way. I invoke the right of personal satisfaction under Kelthariana law. I challenge you to a duel, human. Your life against my claim on the female." The chamber went silent. Personal combat between petitioners was an old tradition, rarely used but never abolished. If Nathan refused, he would be seen as a coward who hid behind legal protections. If he accepted, he would face a Kelthari warrior in single combat. Nathan did not hesitate. "I accept." Lyra grabbed his arm. "Nathan, no. He's trained for combat. He will kill you." "Maybe," Nathan admitted. "But if I refuse, every Kelthari who believes in the old ways will think they can challenge humans and win. This is not just about us anymore. It is about showing them that we are not afraid to stand up for what we believe in." The duel was arranged for the following morning in a designated combat area within the station. Nathan spent the night in meditation and preparation while Lyra sat beside him, refusing to leave. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. "We could run. Find some distant colony where they would never find us." Nathan shook his head. "Running is not an answer. It just delays the problem. Besides, I have not survived this long by being easy to kill." When morning came, the combat area was packed with observers. Species from across the galaxy had gathered to watch a human face a Kelthari in single combat. The betting heavily favored Drax. The rules were simple. Both combatants would fight with traditional Kelthari honor blades, curved weapons designed for quick and lethal strikes. The fight would continue until one combatant yielded, was rendered unable to continue, or died. Drax entered the arena wearing ceremonial armor that left his arms and legs free for movement. He moved with the grace of a predator, every motion controlled and dangerous. He had trained for combat since childhood and had killed many opponents in duels. Before Nathan wore simple clothing and carried his blade with the grip of someone who knew how to use it but preferred not to. He had learned to fight during his years in the military, but he had never enjoyed violence. It was a tool, nothing more. "I will make this quick," Drax promised as they faced each other. "You do not deserve the honor of a long death." "Talk less," Nathan replied. "Fight more." Drax attacked with blinding speed. His blade carved through the air in patterns designed to overwhelm and confuse. Nathan blocked and dodged, giving ground steadily. To the observers, it looked like he was losing, but Grace knew better. She had seen Nathan fight before, and she recognized what he was doing. He was learning. Every attack Drax made taught Nathan something about his opponent's style, speed, and weaknesses. He was taking damage, small cuts and bruises accumulating, but he was building a picture of how to win. Drax grew frustrated as the fight dragged on. His opponent should have fallen by now. Instead, the human kept moving, kept blocking, kept refusing to die. "Stand still and accept your fate," Drax snarled. "No," Nathan said simply. He launched his first real counterattack. It came faster than Drax expected, slipping past his guard to open a shallow cut on his chest. The wound was minor, but the message was clear. Nathan could hit him. The fight shifted. Now Drax was the one being careful, respecting an opponent he had dismissed. Nathan pressed forward, using everything he had learned in the first phase of the battle. His blade found its mark again and again, never deep enough to kill, but always enough to hurt. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Nathan saw his opening. Drax overextended on a thrust, leaving his center exposed. Nathan stepped inside the attack and brought his blade to Drax's throat. For a moment, neither moved. Nathan had the killing strike. All he had to do was push, and the Kelthari who had caused so much suffering would be dead. He did not push. Instead, he stepped back and lowered his blade. "Yield," he said. "The fight is over. You lost." Drax stared at him in disbelief. "Why do you not finish it?" "I would have killed you without hesitation." "I know," Nathan replied. "That is the difference between us. I fight to protect, not to destroy. Your life is not worth taking when sparing it proves my point better." In Kelthari culture, being spared by an opponent was considered worse than death. Drax stood there, humiliated before the entire galaxy, knowing that he would never recover from this moment. He had been beaten by a human who did not even consider him worth killing. The council formally recognized Nathan and Lyra's marriage that afternoon. Representatives from 7 different species approached them afterward to express support and to discuss how similar cases might be handled in the future. The precedent Nathan had set would change galactic politics for generations to come. A week later, the wandering star descended through the clouds of a human colony world called New Haven. It was a modest place, with rolling hills and small towns and people who worked hard to build good lives. Nathan had chosen it because it felt like a fresh start, far from the politics and conflicts that had shaped their journey. Lyra stood beside him in the cockpit as the landing pad came into view. She wore simple human clothing now, nothing special or ceremonial. Her wrists were still scarred from the chains, but those scars were fading. New memories were replacing the old ones. "Are you ready for this?" Nathan asked. Lyra looked out at the green hills and the blue sky and the simple houses where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. It was more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. "I am ready," she said. They walked down the ramp together, hand in hand, stepping onto solid ground for the first time as husband and wife. Grace and Daniel followed behind them, already arguing about where to find the best food in town. In the weeks that followed, word spread across the galaxy. Slaves from Kelthari space and beyond began making their way to human ports, seeking the freedom that Nathan Cole had proven was possible. Not all of them made it, but enough did to change things. Humanity became known as the species that would not turn away those in chains. Nathan and Lyra built a small house on the edge of New Haven, close enough to town for company, but far enough for privacy. Lyra started a medical practice that served everyone who needed help. Nathan took occasional cargo jobs to keep the wandering star flying, always coming home to the woman he had saved and who had saved him in return. They were not heroes in any grand sense. The Galactic Trade Council station hung in the void between star systems like a monument to cooperation. It was massive, built from the combined efforts of 17 different species who had agreed that some disputes needed a neutral ground for resolution. Ships from across the galaxy docked at its ports, bringing diplomats, merchants, and petitioners seeking justice under laws that crossed all borders. Nathan had never been here before. He had heard stories about the great debates that had shaped galactic policy, the treaties signed in its halls, and the conflicts that had been avoided because cooler heads found common ground. None of those stories had prepared him for the reality of standing in a chamber filled with beings from worlds he had never seen. The hearing room was circular, with raised platforms arranged in tiers around a central floor. Representatives from dozens of species watched from their designated sections. Some were humanoid, others were so alien that Nathan could not guess where their eyes or ears might be. All of them had come to witness the dispute between a human cargo hauler and a Kelthari merchant lord. Overseer Drax stood on one side of the central floor, dressed in ceremonial robes that marked his high status. His silver eyes gleamed with confidence as he addressed the council. He had brought documents, witnesses, and centuries of legal precedent to support his claim. "This human stole my property," Drax declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. The female known as Lyra Vian was legally transferred to him as a gift of flesh under Kelthari custom. Instead of honoring that gift, he removed her restraints and fled across the border. "He destroyed 2 of my ships and killed their crews. I demand justice." Ambassador Claire Dawson represented humanity at the council. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many difficult negotiations. She stood at the human platform and listened carefully to every word. "The human delegation acknowledges the deaths of the Kelthari crew members," she said when Drax finished. "We express regret for any loss of life. However, we must point out that those ships were destroyed during a pursuit that took place in neutral space. The wandering star acted in self-defense. Self-defense against lawful recovery of stolen property," Drax countered. "The female belongs to me. Human law does not apply to property transactions that occurred on Voros Prime." Claire shook her head slowly. "The human delegation does not recognize the concept of property as applied to sentient beings. Under our law, Lyra Vian was never property to be given or stolen. Your law means nothing outside your borders," Drax said with obvious contempt. "This station exists precisely because different species have different customs. The Council has always respected those differences. Will you now abandon that principle because one human decided he did not like Kelthari tradition? The chamber buzzed with murmured conversations. Many of the watching representatives seemed to agree with Drax. The Council had survived for centuries by avoiding judgment of internal practices. If humanity pushed too hard, they might damage relationships that had taken generations to build. Claire looked at Nathan, who stood near the edge of the central floor with Lyra beside him. Captain Cole, the Council has granted you permission to speak. Use it wisely. Nathan stepped forward. He was not a diplomat or a lawyer. He was a cargo hauler with engine grease still under his fingernails. But he had spent the entire journey to the station thinking about what he would say, and now was the time to say it. I am not a politician, he began. I do not know all the fancy words that people use in places like this. But I know right from wrong, and I know that putting chains on a person is wrong. It does not matter what planet you come from. It does not matter what your traditions say. Chains are wrong. Drax laughed coldly. A touching speech, but irrelevant. The Council does not exist to impose human morality on the galaxy. No, Nathan agreed. The Council exists because different species agreed that some things matter more than differences. Trade matters. Peace matters. The safety of travelers in neutral space matters. That is why this station was built. That is why all of you are here today. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from species he could not name. If trade matters, then the people doing the trading matter too. If peace matters, then the lives that peace protects matter too. You cannot say that some things have universal value and then pretend that the people affected by those things are worthless. The chamber fell silent. Nathan continued, I am not asking you to change Kelthari law. I am not asking you to go to war over one woman. I am asking you to recognize that when someone crosses into human space and asks for protection, we have the right to give it. Lyra Vian is not cargo. She's not livestock. She's a person who was stolen from her home, forced into chains, and traded like goods at a market. And when I looked into her eyes, I saw someone who deserved better than that. Nathan paused and took a breath. I know this complicates things. I know it creates problems that diplomats will have to solve. But sometimes problems need to be created before they can be solved. Sometimes someone has to stand up and say that a thing is wrong, even if saying it makes everyone uncomfortable. He turned to Lyra and extended his hand. Lyra, will you speak? This is your life, they are deciding. You should have a voice in it. Lyra had been standing quietly, watching the proceedings with growing tension. Now every eye in the chamber turned to her. She had spent years being invisible, a piece of property that no one addressed directly. Speaking before such an assembly was terrifying beyond words, but Nathan's hand was steady, and his eyes held no doubt. He believed she could do this. Maybe it was time to believe it herself. She stepped forward and faced the council. Her voice was soft at first, but it grew stronger as she spoke. I was a healer. I tended to the sick and wounded of my clan. I had a family, a home, a life that meant something. Then the soldiers came, and all of that was taken from me. They put chains on my body and tried to put chains on my soul. For 3 years, I was nothing. I existed only to serve those who owned me. She looked at Drax with eyes that no longer held fear. You gave me away like a broken tool that you no longer needed. You did not see me as a person because your laws taught you that I was not one. But I am a person. I remember who I was, and I am becoming someone new. She turned back to the council. I do not ask you to pity me. I do not ask you to go to war for my sake. I only ask you to recognize what this human recognized when he broke my chains. I am alive. I think and feel and dream like any of you. That should mean something, even in a galaxy as vast as this one. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Claire Dawson spoke again. The human delegation has a proposal. Captain Nathan Cole wishes to marry Lyra Vian under human law. Such a marriage would grant her full citizenship and legal protection within our territory. We ask the Council to recognize this union and affirm that human jurisdiction applies to our citizens regardless of their species of origin. Drax's expression twisted with rage. This is a mockery. He would marry property to steal it from its rightful owner. She is not property, Nathan said firmly. She is the woman I choose to stand beside. If marrying her is what it takes to keep her safe, then that is what I will do. But make no mistake, this is not a trick or a loophole. I am asking her to share my life because I believe she is worth sharing it with. He turned to Lyra with a question in his eyes. They had not discussed this. He had made the proposal without knowing how she would respond. For a moment, everything hung on her answer. Lyra looked at this human who had broken her chains, risked his life to protect her, and now offered her a future she had never imagined possible. She did not know if she loved him yet. Love was something she had almost forgotten how to feel. But she knew that she trusted him, and trust was the foundation on which everything else could be built. Yes, she said quietly. I will marry you, Nathan Cole. The chamber erupted in chaos. Drax shouted demands for rejection of the proposal. Other representatives debated among themselves about precedent and consequences. Claire Dawson called for order, while looking like she was trying not to smile. Above it all, Nathan and Lyra stood together in the center of the storm, their hands clasped tight. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The cockpit of the Wandering Star was small and cramped, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Grace sat in the pilot's chair with her hands flying across the controls. Nathan dropped into the co-pilot's seat and pulled up the sensor display. 3 red dots blinked on the screen, closing fast from behind. Kelthari hunter ships, Grace said grimly. Fast and well-armed. They will catch us in 20 minutes at current speed. Nathan studied the tactical display. The hunters were built for speed and carried weapons that could tear through cargo hauler armor like paper. Fighting was not an option. Running in a straight line would only delay the inevitable. What about the shattered reach? He asked. Grace turned to look at him with wide eyes. That asteroid field? Nathan, that place has killed more ships than Kelthari hunters ever did. The rocks are dense and unpredictable. One wrong move and we become debris. The hunters are bigger than us. They cannot follow through the worst parts of the field. It is our only chance. Lyra stood in the doorway, listening to their argument. She knew about the shattered reach from stories she had heard during her captivity. Kelthari pilots avoided that region because even their advanced navigation systems could not predict the movement of the ancient rocks. He is right, she said quietly. Both humans turned to look at her. Kelthari ships rely on automated systems for navigation. They cannot adapt quickly to changing conditions. If you fly manually through the densest sections, they will not follow. Grace shook her head. Flying manually through that mess would require perfect reflexes and a lot of luck. Then we better hope we have both, Nathan said. He opened a channel to the engine room. Daniel, I need everything you can give me. Push the engines past safe limits if you have to. We are going into the Reach. Daniel's response was calm despite the danger. Understood. I will keep her together as long as I can. Nathan turned to Lyra. Do you know anything about Kelthari ship weaknesses? Anything that might help us? Lyra thought quickly. She had spent years aboard Kelthari vessels, watching and learning, even when she was supposed to be invisible. Their sensor arrays are mounted on the front of the hull. If you approach from unexpected angles, you can create blind spots. Also, their shields are weaker on the underside. They never expect attacks from below. Nathan nodded and filed the information away. Get to the cargo bay and strap in. This is going to get rough. Lyra did not move. I want to stay here. I can help read their movements and predict their tactics. Grace and Nathan exchanged a look. Then Nathan gestured toward a fold-down seat behind the main consoles. Strap in tight. If we hit something, I do not want you flying through the cockpit. The shattered reach appeared on the view screen as a wall of darkness filled with tumbling mountains of rock and ice. Some of the asteroids were the size of small moons, while others were barely larger than the wandering star herself. They moved in slow, chaotic patterns, colliding and breaking apart in an endless dance of destruction. Grace took a deep breath and flew straight into the chaos. The ship shook as smaller rocks bounced off the hull. Grace weaved between larger asteroids with movements that seemed impossible for a vessel of this size. Her hands never stopped moving, adjusting thrust and angle constantly to avoid obstacles that appeared without warning. Behind them, the 3 hunter ships followed into the field. They were more cautious, relying on their automated systems to plot safe paths through the rocks. This made them slower, but it also kept them alive. They are still coming, Nathan reported. Gaining slowly. I see them. Grace banked hard to avoid a spinning chunk of ice the size of a house. We need to go deeper. Find the worst part of the field. Lyra pointed at the sensor display. There. That cluster of large asteroids creates a maze of passages. The hunters will have to follow single file, and the automated systems will struggle with the tight spaces. Grace adjusted course and dove toward the cluster. The passages between the giant rocks were barely wide enough for the wandering star. Metal screamed as the ship scraped against stone, leaving paint and armor plating behind. The first hunter ship tried to follow them into the maze. It was too large and too slow. The pilot trusted his automated systems too much and failed to account for a rotating rock that had shifted position. The ship slammed into the asteroid at full speed and exploded in a ball of fire and debris. One down, Nathan said. 2 still coming. The second hunter was piloted by someone smarter. They pulled back and tried to circle around the cluster, looking for another way through. The third hunter followed the wandering star from a distance, content to track rather than chase. Grace pushed deeper into the maze. The passages grew narrower and the rocks moved faster. She flew on instinct now, reacting to obstacles before she consciously saw them. Sweat dripped down her face, but her hands remained steady. A warning light flashed on Nathan's console. Hull breach in Cargo Bay Section 3. We are losing atmosphere. Daniel, seal that section, Nathan ordered over the communication system. Already on it. Minor damage only. We can keep flying. The second hunter appeared suddenly from above, cutting off their escape route. It opened fire, and green energy bolts streaked past the cockpit. Grace rolled the ship hard, and Lyra felt her stomach lurch as gravity shifted wildly. He's herding us toward the open space, Lyra realized. He wants to push us out of the field where the third hunter is waiting. Nathan saw it too. They were being trapped between 2 enemies with nowhere to run. He made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. Grace, head for that spinning asteroid at 3 o'clock. The big one with the crater. That thing is moving too fast. We cannot get past it. We are not going past it. We are going through the crater. Grace stared at him for a moment, then laughed with something that sounded almost like joy. You are insane. Let us do it. She pointed the wandering star at the spinning monster and accelerated. The asteroid rotated slowly, its crater facing them for only a few seconds each cycle. They would have one chance to fly through the gap. If they missed, they would become part of the rock. The second hunter followed, its pilot too committed to break off the chase. Lyra watched the sensor display and called out the rotation timing. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, now. Grace flew through the crater with centimeters to spare on each side. The ship emerged on the other side, just as the asteroid completed its rotation, blocking the passage behind them. The second hunter tried to follow but entered the crater too late. The rotating walls closed around it like a giant mouth. The ship crumbled and vanished in a cloud of metal and fire. The third hunter was still out there somewhere, but it had lost visual contact. By the time it found them again, the wandering star had cleared the shattered reach and was racing toward the border of human space. Grace collapsed back in her chair, breathing hard. That was too close. Nathan reached over and squeezed her shoulder. You did amazing. We are alive because of you. He turned to Lyra, who was still strapped into her seat with her hands gripping the armrests. You did amazing too. Your information about their sensor blind spots saved us. Lyra released a breath she had been holding for what felt like hours. I never thought I would use that knowledge to fight them. A transmission crackled over the communication system. It was the third hunter ship, broadcasting from somewhere behind them. Human vessel, you have destroyed 2 ships of the Kelthari Dominion and stolen property belonging to Overseer Drax. We are withdrawing now. But this matter is not finished. Drax will petition the Galactic Trade Council for justice. The slave will be returned, and you will pay for what you have done. Nathan opened a channel to respond. His voice was calm and cold. Lyra Vian is not a slave. She is a free person under human law, and she will speak for herself before any council that will listen. Tell Drax that if he wants her back, he will have to go through me. He closed the channel and turned to face Lyra. I meant what I said. Whatever happens next, I will stand beside you. They will not take you without a fight. Lyra looked at this strange human who had risked everything for her. She did not understand him. She was not sure she would ever understand him. But she was beginning to trust him, and that was something she had not felt in a very long time. The border of human space was only hours away now. Beyond it lay safety and the chance for a new beginning. But first, they would have to face the judgment of the Galactic Trade Council and answer for the chains that Nathan had broken. The wandering star moved through the darkness between stars at a steady pace. The journey to human space would take 3 days, and Nathan used that time to give Lyra room to breathe. He did not push her to talk. He did not ask questions about her past. He simply made sure she had food, water, and a warm place to sleep. Lyra spent the first day in her cabin with the door locked. She sat on the small bed and stared at her bare wrists where the chains had been. The skin there was raw and scarred from years of wearing metal bindings. She kept expecting Nathan to come through the door and reveal his true intentions. Kind masters did not exist in her experience. Every act of mercy had always come with a hidden price, but no one came to hurt her. Grace brought meals to her door and left them without demanding anything in return. Daniel walked past her cabin several times and smiled at her through the small window, a nervous smile that seemed more afraid of her than she was of him. And Nathan stayed away entirely, giving her space she did not know how to fill. On the second day, hunger drove her out of the cabin. She found her way to the small kitchen area where the crew took their meals. Grace was there, drinking something hot from a metal cup. The human woman looked up when Lyra entered and gestured toward an empty chair. Sit down. I made soup. It is not fancy, but it will fill your stomach. Lyra sat carefully, keeping her eyes down in the manner she had been taught. Slaves did not look at free people directly. Slaves waited to be addressed before speaking. Grace slid a bowl across the table. You do not have to do that here. The I thing. Nathan meant what he said. You are not a slave on this ship. I do not know how to be anything else, Lyra admitted quietly. I was free once, a long time ago. I do not remember how it felt. Grace studied her for a moment. What did you do before the chains? I was a healer. My clan lived in the valley regions of Kelthos 7. We were peaceful people. We did not want war, but war found us anyway. Lyra's hands trembled slightly around the warm bowl. The soldiers came at night. They killed the elders and took the young ones as slaves. I tried to hide the children, but they found us. They took everyone. Grace said nothing for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and placed her hand over Lyra's. I'm sorry. No one should go through that. Lyra looked up in surprise. Physical comfort from a stranger was not something she had experienced in years. Grace's hand was warm and steady, and something tight in Lyra's chest began to loosen just a little. Nathan was a military medic before he became a cargo hauler, Grace said. He saw terrible things during the border conflicts 10 years ago. Bodies that he could not fix. Friends that he could not save. It changed him. He left the military and bought this old ship because he wanted to help people in his own way, without taking orders from anyone. He risks much by helping me, Lyra said. Drax will not forget this insult. Nathan has a habit of doing the right thing even when it costs him. Grace smiled slightly. It drives me crazy sometimes, but I would not follow anyone else. The kitchen door opened and Nathan walked in. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he had not slept well. He nodded to both women and poured himself a cup of the hot drink that Grace had been enjoying. We are making good time, he said. Should reach the border checkpoint tomorrow evening. Once we are in human space, you will have legal protection. Kelthari law does not apply there. Lyra set down her spoon. And then what happens to me? Nathan sat down across from her. That depends on what you want. We can take you to a colony world where you can start over. We can help you find work or connect you with refugee services. Or you can stay on the ship for a while until you figure things out. The choice is yours. The choice is yours. Those words hit Lyra harder than she expected. She had not made a real choice in 3 years. Every moment of her existence had been controlled by others. The freedom Nathan offered was terrifying in ways she could not explain. I do not know what I want, she admitted. I do not know who I am anymore. Nathan nodded as if this answer made perfect sense. That is okay. You do not have to decide anything right now. Just focus on getting strong again. The rest will come when you are ready. Daniel's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. Nathan, we have a small problem with the port engine. Nothing critical, but I could use an extra pair of hands. Nathan stood up and drained the last of his drink. Duty calls. Grace, keep her company if she wants it. He headed for the door, then paused and looked back at Lyra. Thank you for coming out of your cabin. I know it was not easy. After he left, Lyra sat in silence for a long moment. Then she turned to Grace. Is he always like this? Like what? Kind, patient, treating a slave like a person. Grace laughed softly. He treats everyone like a person. That is just who he is. Some people think it makes him weak. They learn differently when they push him too far. The day passed slowly. Lyra explored the ship in small steps, learning the layout of the corridors and common areas. She found the medical bay and spent time looking at the supplies and equipment. Her hands remembered the work, even if her mind had tried to forget. She had been good at healing once. Maybe she could be good at it again. That evening, she found Nathan in the cargo bay, reorganizing crates that had shifted during launch. He had cut his hand on a sharp edge and was wrapping it clumsily with a piece of cloth. Let me see that, Lyra said, before she could stop herself. Nathan looked up in surprise, but held out his hand without argument. Lyra took it gently and examined the wound. It was shallow but dirty, and his wrapping technique would lead to infection if left alone. You need proper treatment, she said. Where is your medical kit? Nathan pointed toward a cabinet on the wall. Lyra retrieved the kit and cleaned the wound properly, applying antiseptic and a clean bandage with practiced movements. Her hands were steady for the first time in years. "You are good at this," Nathan observed. "I was trained from childhood. Healing is in my blood, even if they tried to beat it out of me." She finished the bandage and released his hand. "Thank you for letting me help. Thank you for helping." Nathan smiled at her, and something in that smile made Lyra's heart skip in a strange way. It was not fear. It was something she had forgotten she could feel. An alarm shattered the moment. Red lights flashed throughout the ship, and Grace's voice came over the speakers with urgent speed. "Nathan, get to the cockpit now. We have Kelthari warships on approach. 3 of them, moving fast." Nathan was running before she finished speaking. Lyra followed him, her heart pounding with a different kind of fear now. Drax had come for her, and he had brought enough firepower to destroy the wandering star 10 times over. The hunt had begun. Nathan Cole had seen many strange things in his years as a cargo hauler, but nothing had prepared him for what waited in the merchant hull of Voros Prime. The planet was a trading hub where humans and aliens did business without the rules of either civilization getting in the way. Nathan preferred it that way most of the time. He delivered goods, collected payment, and moved on to the next job. Simple and clean. The delivery today had been medical supplies for a Kelthari merchant lord named Overseer Drax. The Kelthari were a proud species with pale blue skin and eyes that glowed like polished silver. They stood taller than humans and moved with the grace of predators. Their empire stretched across dozens of star systems, and their laws were harsh in ways that made human history look gentle by comparison. Nathan walked into the merchant hall expecting credits. He had earned good money on this run, and he planned to use it for engine repairs. The wandering star was getting old, and she needed care if she was going to keep flying. He nodded to Drax and waited for the transaction to complete. Drax smiled in a way that showed too many teeth. He clapped his long hands together and spoke in the rough trade language that most species understood. "Nathan Cole, you have served me well. Your supplies arrived on time and in perfect condition. For this, I give you a gift worthy of your service." Nathan frowned. He did not like surprises, and he did not like the way Drax was looking at him. "Credits are fine. We agreed on a price." Drax waved one hand as if brushing away a small insect. "Credits are cold things. I offer you something warm." He gestured toward a doorway at the back of the hall. 2 Kelthari guards walked through, and between them they dragged a figure in chains. She was Kelthari, but smaller than the males. Her blue skin was marked with bruises, and her silver eyes stared at the floor. Heavy metal bindings wrapped around her wrists and ankles, connected by a chain that forced her to take small shuffling steps. She wore thin gray cloth that offered no warmth and no dignity. The guards pushed her forward until she fell to her knees in front of Nathan. "This is Lyra Vien," Drax said with obvious satisfaction. "She was a healer once before her clan lost the war. Now she is property, and I give her to you as a gift of flesh. She will serve you well in whatever way you desire." Nathan felt his stomach turn. He had heard stories about Kelthar's slavery, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. The woman kept her eyes down, her body trembling slightly. She expected cruelty. She had learned to expect nothing else. "I cannot accept her," Nathan said quietly. Drax's smile vanished. The guards shifted their weight, and Nathan noticed their hands moving toward weapons. "You insult me." In Kelthari custom, refusing a gift of flesh is the same as spitting in my face. "Do you wish to start a conflict here, human?" Nathan looked at the woman kneeling before him. If he refused, there would be violence. His ship was docked nearby, but he would never reach it alive if Drax's guards decided to stop him. Even if he escaped, Drax would keep the woman. She would suffer for Nathan's gesture, and nothing would change. He made his choice in the space of a single breath. "I accept your gift," Nathan said. The words tasted like poison in his mouth, but he forced them out. "I thank you for your generosity, Overseer Drax." Drax's smile returned, wider than before. "Excellent. She is yours now, registered in your name. Do with her as you wish." He handed Nathan a small data chip containing the ownership documents. "May she bring you many pleasures." Nathan took the chip and tucked it into his pocket without looking at it. He reached down and took hold of the chain connecting the woman's bindings. She flinched at his touch, but did not resist. She had been trained not to resist. "Come with me," Nathan said softly. He led her out of the merchant hall and through the busy streets of Voros Prime. People of a dozen species passed them without a second glance. Slavery was legal here, and the sight of a bound woman following a man was nothing unusual. Grace. Kim was waiting at the docking bay when Nathan arrived. She was his co-pilot and oldest friend, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She took one look at the chain in Nathan's hand, and her expression darkened. "What is this?" she demanded. "Payment," Nathan said bitterly. Drax would not take no for an answer. "Help me get her aboard." Grace stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She understood. She had known Nathan for 15 years, and she knew he would never keep a slave. Whatever his plan was, she would trust him until he proved her wrong. They boarded the Wandering Star together. Daniel Ortiz, the ship's engineer, met them in the cargo bay. He was a big man with gentle hands, better at fixing machines than dealing with people. His eyes went wide when he saw the bound woman. "Nathan, what did you do?" "Not now, Daniel. Get us off this rock. I want to be in human space before Drax changes his mind about anything." Daniel hesitated for only a moment before hurrying to the engine room. Grace headed for the cockpit to begin launch procedures. Nathan led the woman called Lyra to a quiet corner of the cargo bay where cargo containers blocked the view from the rest of the ship. He released the chain and knelt down in front of her so that their eyes were level. She finally looked at him, confusion mixing with fear in her silver gaze. She did not understand what was happening. Nathan reached into his belt and pulled out a small toolkit. He selected a thin metal pick and began working on the lock that held her wrist bindings closed. "I am going to remove these chains," he said quietly. "You are not my property. You are not anyone's property. Do you understand?" Lyra stared at him as if he had spoken in a language she did not know. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because chains belong on cargo, not on people." The first binding clicked open and fell away from her wrist. Nathan started on the second one. "Where I come from, slavery is a crime. It does not matter what Kelthari law says. On my ship, you are free." The second binding fell. Nathan moved to her ankles and continued working. Lyra watched him with wide eyes, still waiting for the trick, still waiting for the cruelty to begin. Men did not simply free slaves. There was always a price. When the last chain fell to the deck, Nathan stood up and offered her his hand. "My name is Nathan Cole. Welcome aboard the Wandering Star. We have a spare cabin that nobody is using. You can rest there until you decide what you want to do with your freedom." Lyra took his hand slowly, as if touching something fragile that might break. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Nathan helped her to her feet and led her toward the crew quarters. Behind them, the engines hummed to life, and the ship began to rise. Voros Prime fell away beneath them, and the stars welcomed them back into the endless dark. Lyra did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if this strange human could be trusted. But for the first time in 3 years, she was not wearing chains, and that was enough to make her heart beat with something that felt almost like hope.